Is there a war for talent in today's market? Because that is what everyone is saying. And does that war for talent affect the quality of your hires? Maybe, but you can't control the supply and demand of the market, right? The one thing you can control is who you hire. Now, a couple years ago, a CEO named Dan and I met, and he says to me, "Susie, I'm really struggling with a new hire." And I thought, okay, what's the struggle? And he said, well, here's the thing. I heard you speak a month ago, and I had an aha moment, and not a good aha moment. It was a crap, I hired the wrong person aha moment. I said, okay, well, tell me more. And Dan said, well, here's the thing. I know I need to get rid of the guy, but I'm anxious because I feel burned. Worse, my team has been burned because he messed up everything and we trusted him. He even lost us our 2 biggest deals. I said, Dan, I get it. You know what? The thing is, oftentimes it's not just bad hires that are the problem. What really hurts companies is hiring average performers. As Bill Gates said, the worst thing about an average employee is not the mistakes they make. The worst thing is that they are taking up space that could be occupied by someone phenomenal. Now, as I'm sharing this story with all of you, I want you to take a moment and reflect on your business. Because some of you may be sitting here thinking, yeah, but our hires haven't been that bad. We haven't lost deals. But how many of those hires have ended up average performers and not the great hire you expected them to be? And how much does that cost your company? So then Dan says to me, Susie, I suck at interviewing. Everyone at my company sucks at interviewing. And I thought, I've heard that at least 100 times before. He then asked me, so before I make a new hire, how can I really know in an interview if that person's going to be the right fit before I hire them? And this got me thinking, how do we explain a bad hire? Better yet, how do we explain when we hired someone who looked great on paper, interviewed well, and had the experience, and they end up an average performer? So I said to Dan, over the last 10 years, I've had the opportunity to assess, coach, and manage hiring managers and business leaders, which has exposed me to many myths, misperceptions, and mistakes when it comes to interviewing. Here's the good news. I have a solution for you. And he said, great, what is it? I said, Dan, you need a map. What? I don't get it, he said. I smiled and said, Dan, imagine you're traveling to Chicago for the very first time, and you have to get to a specific destination tomorrow. So you go on Google Maps, put in the address. Simple enough, right? Well, suppose that map that Google shows you is the wrong map. The map labeled Chicago is actually Seattle. Can you imagine your frustration trying to get to your destination tomorrow morning because no matter what you do, you will not get there using that map? And he starts to laugh. Okay, Susie, I get it. My map for interviewing sucks. And I said, exactly. You're using the wrong map, taking you on the wrong path. So here's the great news for all of you today. I'm here to offer you a new map. And as I take you through this new map here, at each stop, I'm going to share with you effective interviewing techniques that are different than what your company is doing. And all these techniques can be also applied to other aspects of your business beyond interviewing. And the best part is they are simple. So simple, in fact, you can use them as soon as today. So let's get going on our stop. The first one is the danger zone of biases. And as I take you through this, I want you to pay very close attention because this one thing, if you change it, it will increase your interviewing accuracy and elevate the quality of your hires immediately. Have you ever been in an interview where within minutes you know that person is not going to be a good fit? I think we all make these snap judgments in interviews, and most of the time we don't know we're doing it. None of what I'm sharing here with you is my opinion. The danger of biases is one of the most robust findings in social science and also one of the most ignored. I'm going to share with you one of my favorite case studies around biases, and I've pretty much read them all. So here it is. Out of the University of Toledo, a woman named Tricia Prickett wants to determine how important is an interview really when it comes to making a hiring decision. So she brings in a group of trained psychologists to interview candidates, and she videos them. She then brings in the most unqualified people on the planet to observe these interviews. She calls them naive observers. I'll tell you, they were college sophomores. And she says to these college sophomores, take a look at this interview, and can you predict, was this person hired or not? So she shows them 30 minutes, 20 minutes, less and less time. Now, I already by accidentally showed you the screen prior, so some of you maybe caught the answer, but what's your guess? I want to hear people shout out, what's your guess? How much time do you think it took a naive observer to come to the same hiring conclusion as a trained interviewer? What do you guys think? All right, so you guys all saw it. 10 seconds. That's it. And honestly, I've never gotten that guess, but I also haven't shown it ahead of time. So the answer is 10 seconds. And that's it. I mean, 10 seconds is not very long. What happens in an interview in 10 seconds? Well, let's think about it. I go in, shake your hand. Hi, I'm Susie Japs. So good to meet you. Oh, me? I'm doing great. I was coming down the 805 in my Prius. I thought there was going to be traffic. There was none. I went over to Starbucks, had a treat. Now I'm here. That's it. That was enough for not only a naive observer to come to the same hiring conclusion as a trained interviewer, but also with a high degree of correlation to be able to determine whether the interviewer believes the candidate is ambitious, competent, confident, employable, intelligent, trustworthy. They were able to discern all those things to the same level of accuracy as someone who spent 30 minutes interviewing, which is shocking. So does this mean we shouldn't waste our time in interviews? I mean, because clearly anyone can come to a hiring conclusion in 10 seconds, right? No, please do not leave here thinking that, okay? No. What actually happened here is called confirmation biases. It's when we make a snap judgment based on a thin slice of time, and we believe that gives us insight into who that person is. And for the rest of the interview, we will actually be spending time trying to confirm or deny that hypothesis we came up with in the first 10 seconds. Like, oh, Susie Japs, she's great. We drive the same car. She has good eye contact. She even kind of dresses like my best friend. She's going to be fantastic. So how do we stop biases? First, we need to start admitting they exist, and then equal them out with a simple trick I use on a weekly basis, and it has even allowed me to hire someone I would not have based on the first interaction, and they have since become a fantastic hire for us. So here's the trick. In an interview, I want you to be conscious of what you're thinking and feeling about someone in the first 10 seconds, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Do you like them? Do you not like them? If you like them, for a short time, I want you to start asking them tougher and tougher questions, because your natural bias of liking them will actually guide you to be easier on them than someone you didn't like. Use this for a short time, and it will help equal out your bias. Now, what if you don't like the person? Maybe they were late to the interview, and maybe they said something you disagreed with. So at this point, you're like, I'm done. I want you to start asking them simpler and easier questions for a short time, because your natural bias of not liking them will actually guide you to be harder and tougher on them than you would have for somebody you liked. Keep in mind, you do not need to use this trick the entire interview. The purpose of it is to make you conscious of your bias and make every effort to equal it out so you can remain an objective interviewer. Because if we're not careful, we may hire the wrong person, or worse, we may fail to hire the best. Now, our next stop on our trip here are the do's over haves. The official dogma of hiring is we always want to interview the most experienced, best degree people from our industry, which results in a checklist of what someone has to have for a job. This belief is one of the reasons Why companies suck at interviewing. We need to start focusing on what someone can do over what they have. And I'll highlight this in a quick story for you guys. A couple years ago, we had the opportunity to study the hiring practices of a national marketing agency. They believed that hiring less experienced people would be detrimental to the success of their new hires. And what we found surprised them, because we discovered over 80% of the time they were hiring from their competition and paid a premium for years of experience. And guess what? Always, those hires were least successful. Things like management, expectations, and culture fit varied so differently at this agency than all the other competition and competitors they had, that hires they made that had lots of experience actually needed retraining to be able to do tasks they've been doing for years. For example, the highly valued skill of managing 2 client accounts actually hindered their success at this agency, who needed them to manage 5 to 10 clients at one time. It's a big difference. So you're thinking, okay, Susie, we get it. Do's over haves. But how in an interview are we going to know if someone can do those things successfully at our company, in our culture, and with our team? Well, there are many techniques to doing this, and I'm only going to share the simplest one with you now so you can actually remember it. I want you to throw out the resume. You guys are thinking crazy, right? She's crazy. Why would we do that? Well, who writes the resume? The candidate. Don't allow the interview to be guided by only what's in a candidate's resume. Instead, before the interview, come up with a clear list of what you want that person to do successfully at 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months. What do they have to do to be a good culture fit? What are the challenges that will come up, and what do they have to do to be successful? By focusing on the do's over haves, you will begin to accurately predict if someone can be successful in your company, with your team, and in your culture. Now, the next stop is a turn down memory lane. I want you guys to think back to all the interviews you conducted. And is anyone here tired of sitting through interviews where candidates give you surface level prepped answers full of cliche terms? Anybody here? Well, nearly 100% of the time I observe an interview and I hear open-ended behavioral questions like, tell me about a time you had to manage deadlines, or share with me your greatest accomplishment. And what I would hear next is a surface level prepped answer given, and the interviewer moves on to the next question. But what if that interviewer spent the next 10 to 15 minutes digging? Dig, dig, dig into the who was part of the accomplishment, what did you do, why did you do it, who was involved, and what did you learn? Imagine the breadth and quality of information that would be given and collected. What we also notice often when we're going into companies' hiring processes and systems is that they're trying to shortcut the process. They eliminate interviewing steps, hoping to save time and still get the desired results. For example, a company here in town, they have 7 locations, and their downtown location was short a person earlier this year. So the manager, Sherry, knew she needed to hire ASAP. Sherry was interviewing candidates. The 3rd candidate she met looked great on paper, interviewed well. In fact, Sherry was convinced within minutes of meeting him, this is the guy. So she only met him for an hour. Then she had her team meet him, and they cut that interview short at 25 minutes because they were so convinced this is the one. Then came the reference checks. Of the 3 he gave them, 1 called back. And she thought, you know what, I need to fill this right now. And he's the one, I'm convinced, so she hired him. Fast forward 5 months later, and he was let go. Not only did he not end up being great, he alienated the team and caused that location to lose a number of long-term customers due to his lack of follow-up and follow-through. You see, if you dig, dig, dig in an interview, it is much harder to shortcut a process. And by doing that, you will also be able to start figuring out how much of a past accomplishment is relevant and transferable or not to what you need that person to do at your company. Let's think about it real quick here. If Sherry and her team had actually interviewed that candidate thoroughly, which would have included throwing out the resume, focusing on the do's over haves, dig into his answers, not allowed their gut instinct to drive the length and time of the interview, and completed more than one reference check, would they have hired him?
No.
Probably not. So our next stop is something that you probably know to do, but you don't do very often. Shut up and listen. Nearly all the time when I go in and observe an interview, I'm shocked at how much talking the interviewer does, which is time that is lost on being able to evaluate and assess the candidate. So the rule here of thumb is 20% of the time you should be talking and asking questions, which means 80% of the time you'll be listening, not talking. Now our final stop on our trip is something you probably don't know to do, so pay attention. When we go in and audit companies' hiring processes, we often find that reference checks are not being completed on a regular basis. And the response we get to this is, well, what's the point? They're going to give us a list of people that are going to say great things about them. And my response to this is, don't ask, tell. Tell them who you want to speak with. If you dig in an interview, you should be able to determine who is the most relevant manager, coworker, client to speak with. And a candidate's willingness or not to provide that information is always very telling. As Steve Jobs once said, hire great people the first time because A players will run circles around B and C players all day. And this leaves us at the end of our trip. As you can see, it is impossible to interview well if you have the wrong map. That's right, it's not you that sucks, it's your map. Having the right map will make all the difference. So here's what I think you should do with your old map, which is right here. So it's your job as your company's leader to decide which map you will use. Thank you.